And we're pleased to have joining us to help walk us through the election process in Nova Scotia this summer, the Director of Policy and Communications for Elections Nova Scotia. Her name is Naomi Shelton. And Ms. Shelton, thank you for joining us today on Telile 24/7.
Thank you, Adam. I'm pleased to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you here, especially since we know it's a busy time for you and your colleagues. Just to kick things off, can you give me a sense of what the mood is like at the Elections Nova Scotia office right now? Obviously, the work is being done in returning offices across 55 ridings around the province, but what does it feel like for you and your colleagues at home base right now?
We get a high volume of calls through our public call center as well as our returning office call center, which helps to support our staff in the field. So it's busy times, but we always enjoy election time. It's an important work and we're pleased to do it.
Well, this is a very different election time than we're used to having here in Nova Scotia. It's been quite a few years since we've had a summertime election, but most importantly, this is a pandemic election for Nova Scotia. A few provinces have had one, including New Brunswick and Newfoundland, but I just wonder, can you give me a sense of what kind of preparation was needed and is needed by you and your colleagues to be able to safely hold an election while still getting the vote out during this phase of the pandemic?
So we considered pandemic planning for the last year and a half and beyond, when COVID-19 came onto the radar. We considered that in every aspect of our election planning and incorporated pandemic protocols in all of our functions. So Elections Nova Scotia is unique in that Nova Scotia is the only jurisdiction in Canada that does not have a fixed date election cycle. So we have to choose a date that we feel the election may be called, the earliest date that it may be called, and plan towards that and do our best efforts. We are always planning to be ready at all times. So with the pandemic challenge on top of that, it made it a little bit more challenging to achieve those plans because we didn't know when the election might be called and where that might be in terms of where we would be within the COVID cycle. So we worked very closely with our other provincial colleagues, as you had mentioned, New Brunswick, and also Saskatchewan, British Columbia, the Yukon, and Newfoundland and Labrador, that all were able to have, or all had elections during the pandemic. And most were able to facilitate them effectively, efficiently, and safely. Newfoundland's experience was quite different given the timing of an outbreak in the latter part of their RIP period, so closer to their election day. But that provided us a lot of really important lessons learned and best practice. So we drew off the best practice from those other provinces as to what pandemic protocols to put in place for safe in-person voting. So to have masking for election workers and voters, and to require physical distancing, hand sanitizing. We're hiring extra election workers to ensure frequent cleaning of high-touch surfaces in voting locations. And we're having tabletop shields between the voter and the election worker. We're also going to be providing individual pencils, so there's no reusing of pencils for voting. And we're asking voters to bring their own mask. If they don't have a mask, the one can be provided at the voting location, as well as their ID and their own pencil if there's any, their own pen if there's any paperwork that they need to work out. So that's a lot of the best practices for in-person voting that we learned from other provinces, as well as lessons learned from a jurisdiction like Newfoundland and Labrador. We are able to look at a lot of risk planning scenarios and emergency scenarios and think up be planned in appropriately for risk mitigations for those. So we are very much prepared should we face a similar situation here. We also noticed from our other provincial colleagues that there was a greater uptake in early voting and remote voting options, especially write-in ballot. So we looked at that, and we are anticipating greater volumes and already seeing greater volumes of early voting, and we're promoting our write-in ballot option. So the write-in ballot is a vote by mail option, or also you can still vote by write-in ballot without facilitating your vote through the mail. You can have an agent, a trusted friend or family member, act as your agent and pick up your write-in ballot kit from your returning office and bring it to you at home and then take it back. And then also the returning office in your electoral district can arrange for a write-in ballot team to come right to your home and facilitate your voting there. So there's lots of safe voting options in our 41st provincial general election.
Now, is this Nova Scotia's first experiment with the write-in ballot option? Has there ever been any kind of proxy vote that would have happened beforehand, or is this all new to Elections Nova Scotia?
It's been in play in previous elections, and it's usually just a method that's used for somebody who is going to be out of province, or somebody who maybe has mobility issues and isn't able to leave their home. So previously, it was people who were traveling, maybe snowbirds, or also members of the military that were posted outside of the province at the time that would use the write-in ballot. We also have previously had the write-in ballot teams able to go to people's homes to facilitate their vote in their home if they're not able to come out in person. So that in itself is not a new process. What would be different this time around is that we are promoting that in a greater way and seeing large volumes. So that's what is new this time. And people that wouldn't normally choose to have voted that way are looking at that as an option this time. What's important to note about the write-in ballot is that you do have to apply to vote by that method. So contact your local returning office if you want to have a write-in ballot team come to your home. Or you can also apply online on our Elections Nova Scotia website, or if the online application isn't something that you're comfortable with, there's also a paper form. But you do have to apply, and then you need to pay attention to the deadlines and dates in order to make sure that your completed write-in ballot will get back in time.
I'm wondering, Ms. Shelton, you've started now the process of actual voting that got underway last Wednesday, July 21st. And I'm wondering, obviously, it's not easy to pin down the numbers at this exact moment, but you seemed optimistic just a few moments ago when discussing the early options for voting. What can you tell me about people taking up things like mail-in voting and the other voting options available at this time?
We are over the 1,400 mark for write-in ballot applications, and I know that we have over 5,000 early votes as well. So early voting is definitely in full swing, and I encourage voters, if you're interested in voting early, vote safely. That's a great way to avoid any kind of lineup or congestion in your voting location. Contact your local returning office, and they can help you. You can also go on the Elections Nova Scotia website and enter your address in the Where Do I Vote tool, and it will tell you the early voting locations close to you. When you go to vote early, they will be able to generate you a ballot on demand. That means that when you go in and request your ballot, they will print a ballot with your candidates. That's important to note because in Nova Scotia for early voting, we have a vote anywhere system, which is wonderful during a summer election, because if you're at your cottage or your camp, or if you're traveling around our beautiful province, you can vote where you are. So you don't have to, before election day, you do not have to vote in your own electoral district. So you can find a returning office or an early voting location that's going to be close to where you are. And you can go in and say that you want to vote, and they will be able to print you a ballot on demand with the candidates from your electoral district.
Was that something that you folks prepared in anticipation of a summer election, or is this something that you have tried at Elections Nova Scotia in previous elections, the idea that a person doesn't have to be in their own riding to cast a vote for their riding?
So that was in place in the 2017 election, so that's not new. But again, we're promoting it heavily this election because of the summer timeframe, as well as the pandemic, so that people, if they wish, maybe they travel into the city to work during the day, they could potentially vote on their lunch hour, or if they are staying home in their electoral district, they can vote there as well. It's just important to note that the Vote Anywhere option is available prior to Election Day. On Election Day, you need to vote in your electoral district at either the returning office for your electoral district or at your assigned polling location.
All right, that's good to have that clarification. Voter turnout is always an issue in any exercise of the democratic process here in Nova Scotia and across Canada. The 2017 election yielded a 54% voter turnout, although it was higher in some ridings than others. And I just wonder, are you optimistic that we might see an uptick in those numbers? Is it still too early to tell? What's your sense on whether the summer, the pandemic, or any other factor might keep people from going to the polls this year?
It's too early to tell, to really to speak to voter turnout overall, but we have made a number of safe voting options available and are working hard to ensure that voters understand their safe voting options, so they will feel comfortable to come out and cast their ballot or to cast their ballot at home using the write-in ballot.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground in a short time, Ms. Shelton, and I appreciate you giving me some time here. Did you have anything to add about all of this just before we wrap it up?
Just to put a little plug in for election workers, that we do need more election workers this election to support our pandemic protocols. So if you're interested in working the election, please call the returning office in your electoral district.
All right, that's good to know, and we'll do what we can to get the word out as well. You and your colleagues are knee-deep in one of the most important jobs anybody can have, not just at this time of year, but all year long, and we appreciate you taking some time for us. Thank you, Naomi Shelton, for giving me a couple of minutes here on Telile 24/7 today.
Thank you, Adam.
That's Naomi Shelton. She is the Director of Policy and Communications for Elections Nova Scotia, and we've been speaking to her via Zoom from her office in Halifax.